thinking about fuel for the boiler, we've had a good soaking rain here the last couple of days. There's plenty of wood on the ground, but it's all quite wet. Here's a piece I picked up already. Wet through and through. I'm going to give it a try in the boiler and see what I would do if I were actually in a hiking situation and how I could use wet wood, or if I could. In a previous test of the Backcountry boiler, I tried using a tab of Esbit, which is solid fuel, in place of wood. Now, since the Backcountry boiler holds 2 cups of water, I knew that 1 cube of Esbit would be very marginal to be able to bring it to a boil, and since the boiler is not really designed for work with Esbit to optimize the kind of flame pattern that it puts out, I didn't expect it to do very well, and certainly I was not able to bring it to a rolling boil. The purpose of the experiment was to see whether Esbit would be a good alternative fuel to wood in cases where the wood is wet, as it often will be when I go backpacking here in the east. So, what I've done is gathered some wood from my yard. It has been rainy the last few days, or last night actually, and a little bit yesterday, so the wood was wet when I picked it up. I didn't make any special effort to try and keep it dry, but just to make it a little more realistic, I'm going to douse it in water. Make it just as though I had been hiking in the rain and had to pick up whatever sticks there were. I'm going to try a combination of Esbit and wet wood to see if I can bring it to a boil that way. The thinking is that the heat of the Esbit flame will be able to dry the wood and ignite it, and I'll be able to get a boil out of just one Esbit cube. Esbit's kind of interesting stuff to work with. It smells funny. It smells like fish, and you just light it directly, and then it burns for about 10 minutes, a little more, and it leaves behind a little residue, which is not a super big problem. But what I'm going to do is that, as that residue, as it burns down, the bottom of the cube tends to stick to whatever it's on, and that inhibits airflow. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit, a few chunks, little tiny pieces of wood in the stove that the flaming Esbit can rest on, so it'll get air from underneath. And then I'm going to light it like this. So the heat from the lighter begins to vaporize the flammable part of the Esbit. And although it may be difficult to see, I do have a corner burning. I'll set it in there. Set it in the Backcountry boiler, in which I have 2 cups of water, as I said, or as typical setup. So now I will begin to feed the wet fuel in, which hopefully will not extinguish the fire. Okay, I'm going to have a good Esbit burn going on inside the boiler. I don't know if you can see that very well. The wood in there, as I said, is soaking wet. Not only was it wet from being rained on last night and being under snow last week, but I've doused it now to simulate conditions under which I would have just been hiking in the rain. So you're seeing a little steam a little bit of smoke and a little bit of steam coming off of the wood as it dries. So hopefully this ought to work for us. Okay, it's been a few minutes. Success is by no means immediate. I have done this before while backpacking, when I've, not with a boiler though, but I have started fires with wet wood using an Esbit tab at the beginning. So I was fairly sure this was going to work, although since I used the very wettest wood I could find, it did take a while for the wood to dry out. But now we're actually beginning to see a wood fire burning. The Esbit tab is, maybe 2/3 burned already, and the wood is beginning to burn. I put about as much wood in there as I thought would still allow for good airflow around the wood to let it dry. We'll see if that's enough to also boil the water. It's not clear at all. There you are. Now you're seeing a very good wood fire coming off. Alrighty, and now we are getting the rolling boil, which tells us that dinner is essentially ready. Now the success, of course, was sort of a foregone conclusion once we had the wood actually catching fire. That is to say, the boiler should work the way we expected, although the real concern was, could I put enough wood in there, could the Esbit dry enough wood to bring 2 cups of water to boiling? I expected it would, and sure enough it does. Now, this is not an optimal thing, but wet wood never is. That is to say, you know, in perfect conditions, you could take the backcountry boiler with you and never use anything but wood. Not ever bring any fuel at all. Under realistic conditions here on the East Coast, I would have to bring some Esbit tabs with me, and every time I started a fire using very wet wood, I would need to use the Esbit tabs. However, with one Esbit tab, I can, even in my Esbit stove, which is designed for Esbit and so on and so forth, I can really only bring 1 cup, 1.5 cups of water to a boil reliably, depending on wind and so forth. But here I've easily been able to bring 2 cups of water to a boil, and with the amount of with 1 Esbit cube and some wood. So that is a fairly good outcome, and I think that bringing a few Esbit tabs along with you when using the backcountry boiler will keep you in hot food for the duration of your hike.